Commoner Prism has always been a pretty decent contender in the format. It's really good until, of course, it runs up against something it's really not good against. But the already decent deck made leaps and bounds with Dusk Till Dawn's release. A 0-4 Herald? Check. A Herald above curve D-React? Check. A power-crept Blinding Beam? You better believe. Check. So what's the deck look like now, and how does it change things in the format? Let's talk what's in, what's out, and how it changes the matchups. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again. A fabulous cast here today talking Pummel Prism, or the new version of it, with all the sweet common upgrades it got in, or she got, I suppose, in Dusk Till Dawn. Some pretty good tools there, and the deck got way better. So before we go into it, I do want to remind everybody the Battle Hardened Portland is coming up. It's actually not that far away now, September 16th and 17th weekend. It's hosted by my buddy Travis over at Fab Foundry. Remember, we do have the link below, so when you go there to sign up or when you go to get all the singles, use that link below. You get a small kickback from that. But again, we'd love to see you all in Portland. Unfortunately, I will not be there that weekend, which really bums me out because it's in my hometown, but sometimes that's how it goes. But yes, Battle Hardened Portland, September 16th and 17th coming up. And yes, there is a commoner event there, I hear, at least. All right, so talking Commoner Pummel Prism today, and let's go ahead and splash up the new tricks she got in this set. So it's kind of interesting, this set didn't actually have any rares for her, I don't believe. I believe all the rares were the EA reprints of the Heralds, but instead she got some pretty cool commons. And they're very, so the Angelic Rathe, for example, target attack action card with Herald in its name gets +4, +3, +2. And it's an instant, though, so it doesn't defend, so it's a little above curve. It specifically targets Herald, so it seems about right, if you compare it to like a Lightning Press or something like that, because it specifically only targets Herald as opposed to everything, although that card was elemental, but this is talented too, so that pretty much tracks. We also have Celestial Resolve. Target attack action card with Herald in its name, it gets +5, +4, +3. Well, that's pretty darn good. And, most people running Sinks and Fates, to which are standalone 0-4s. Well, this can potentially 2-card block for 8. That's pretty good. With the red, of course. But it does have the drawback that you have to have a Herald in hand, and you have to use that Herald in order to use this, and it does nothing by itself. So that's why you're getting a little bonus out of it, but it's only a little bonus. But then the big one, right? I know Angelic Rathe is the big sexy card, Celestial Reprimand is what does it. This is a strictly power-crept Blinding Beam for Heralds, right? So target card defending an attack with Herald in its name gets -3, -2, -1, and I specifically have the blue and the yellow there because, well, that's what we used to run Blinding Beam for. Not gonna see a ton of 8s getting tossed at you, right? So it makes sense to have the 2s and the 3s that then, remember, Commoner's a no sideboard format, at least as of the time of shooting this video, because Blitz is changing, right? But, you pick up what I'm laying down, right? You can't swap it out, so you want those cards to also be functional. The red is not super useful, so I like going with the yellow and the blue. Now, before we go into the deck list itself, a few comments. It's really easy, I think, and it was for me too the first time I did this. It was really easy for me to just start bombing these in. But then once I started doing, and these are the ones that I was specifically looking at, was the, the red, yellow Angelic Rathe, red, yellow Resolve, and then the blue, yellow Reprimand. But then I started realizing, I was like, man, that's a lot of cards that don't block. What happens when I inevitably get a whole hand of them? And not only that, it's even worse because they say target card, right? Target attack action, target defending an attack with Herald in its name. If you don't have a Herald, these are stuck. They can't defend. You're pitching for maybe Prism's ability, but you could potentially get stuck. So we have to go lighter here. And again, in a non-sideboard format where we have to play for the field, we have to go lighter here, right? So what I want to do is go ahead and pull up the deck, all right? And this is actually, we're starting with my old deck, the old deck that I had, which was the previous version that we did in a previous video, and I really want to use this as a jumping off point. Now, the idea of this was we were really leaning heavily into Veiled Intentions. That's the common version out of, I believe it was Everfest, that essentially was a Phantasmify, right? Phantasmify is a rare, so we couldn't use that. That was from Monarch, but Veiled Intention was kind of the same concept by and large. All right, and then the idea there being that we would combo that with a Pummel, or Constantly Threatened Pummel. Again, we're talking in a matchup where people have poppers, and use your gloves, right? And then do some damage and do it again. So in there, we were running stuff like Chimera because it was just more damage output. We didn't care about Heralds, and then Blinding Beams, like I said. So by and large, you see that's the framework that we're working off of. And I'm pretty much doing the same thing, except for I'm really just trying to swap out and make it strictly better, right? So hop on over to the deck now. Okay, so we have Iris, of course. I actually did think that new orb, or I think it's an orb, right? Whatever. The new Illusionist weapon is a rare, and it's 2 to turn an aura in. But you're really only working with Spectral Shields, which you're really only getting by and large off of your Herald of Protections in this case, or Stuff in Soul. So that's 4 for a 5 attack. It's not horrible. And yeah, I'd realize you can line it up different. So there's an argument there to be doing that because we're really not using Iris much anyway either. So there's certainly an argument to the orb. I just left the Iris in, but you can absolutely take note and run that the way you want. So for the loadout, we've got the Gauntlet, the Cross Strap, right? That'll give you a free Pummel, basically, is how you're going to use that for the free Pummel. Gauntlet for +2 when you're going, right? In the olden days, like I said, you would have done your Veiled, your Gauntlet, and obviously you're using that in a matchup where you're not worried about getting popped, right? To be very clear, right? And then the Gauntlet gives you another 2, and you just go on that. Okay, we also have Silent Stilettos in there. We've got Null Gloves, Null Hood. Do remember that we have Spell Void on the Dreamweavers, right, if you need it. So we're effectively running AB 2.5, if you want to call it that. And then I have options for the Helm, options for the boots. Okay, the boots, Snapdragon's obviously working off of Wartune, which is really good. Right, so here's what I've decided to do for the flips, right? So we had Celestial Reprimand swap straight in for Blinding Beam. That one's really a no-brainer. You do notice, though, that I'm only running yellow Celestial Resolve. And here's the logic on that. Okay, it's yellow, it pitches yellow, and it gives me essentially a D-React. Okay, but I wanted it to still be useful if I was in a pinch, right? So I was looking and I was like, all right, it's about the same curve. It gives me a little more than something else, but it's not, right? I can get 4 and not have to risk too much here. So that was the logic. So that's how I landed on 1 Celestial Resolve. Now I did run the 4 Angelics. I did run red and yellow on that. And then you can see also I'm running no duh here, right? But we're running straight Heralds, okay? So the Enigmas, I took out the Enigmas. We're on full Rainbow Protection, full Rainbow Wartune, no shocker there. I'm on Red-Blue Ravage, Red-Blue Rebirth, and then on Herald of Tenacity. Now, you can ask a reasonable question, why the blues? The answer is, again, non-sideboard, and Icelander's kind of good in the format. People try Kano, but there's usually they try the attack Kano. But you need blues. I get the allure of trying to do everything yellow here, but again, remember, we don't have Luminaris, so I think running blues for protection, given how good these are on curve, assuming they're not being popped, of course, I think that's the right call. And then you will also notice, again, I'm still running Fate and Sync. The question I get a lot is, why not Yellow Pummel? I think it's a fair question. The problem was when I had run that previously, I just wasn't cycling, right? The commoner just doesn't cycle its deck very often unless you're like a straight up fatigue commoner or something like that. There wasn't a ton of deck cycling. So I just kind of went with red Pummel, stick it in the arsenal. Again, you've got cross strap to basically effectively pay for it. I mean, obviously it pays for the Herald, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's 1 yellow, right? 3 card hand, or 2 if we're an arsenal. That's pretty good, right? Now, keep in mind with your gloves, right? If you're in a match you expect to get popped, you still have to be smart about how you time it. And those Angelic Wraths being free are really strong, right? So we don't have Veiled Intentions anymore. Angelic Wraths better for the most part, except obviously it doesn't block. So that's what you're really trying to do here, is just trying to lay a big one on and pair it with a Pummel, right? And keep in mind, you've got, excellent targets for, so I will say one of the problems, one of the drawbacks to Reprimand being free is that it has to be used, in this case, offensively, whereas Blinding Beam can be used defensively, right? You can have it in your arsenal, pay, and then target the card, right, when they're attacking you. And you don't have that option here. So I think you gotta be careful with putting Reprimand in your arsenal, but having it be free is pretty big, right? And now, to be clear, that's one of the advantages of having the blues in here, is that you can Herald and then have Blinding Beam on board. So again, if you are doing the testing, and depending on what your meta looks like, I mean, it's commoner, so who the heck knows what your meta is going to look like on any given Saturday, right? But I do think there's an argument for Blinding Beam, right? You could very easily come back and run maybe yellow Reprimand, yellow Blinding Beam, right? There's certainly the argument for that, because we have the blues to support it. So this is what I've landed on now. This is what I'm going to be playing and testing and playing with. But the cards that I did mention there in terms of obvious slots, again, we have the blues for Blinding Beam. I think that's perfectly reasonable to look at. And then if you want to run a lower cost curve, you could do that as well. But that's where I'm at on this. So it's really kind of the same deck overall, just iterating on it and seeing where we can go. I do think it's better, right, in terms of the Wraths, in terms of explosivity. I mean, turn 0, right? You go turn 0, you need a Herald, a yellow, and 2 Wraths. Oh, maybe. I mean, assuming they're not popping you, of course. But isn't that always the thing? So anyway, that's my take. Hopefully you enjoyed the list. I know those who came just for the list, they already clicked and they're gone, so fair enough. So if you're here, give me a Pummel Prism in the comments, and I'll thank you very much for that. And if nothing else, folks, go Commando.